What high school conspiracy turned out to be true at your school? That our high school had an extensive network of underground tunnels and shelters left over from World War II. Sure enough, not long after I graduated, they were renovating one of the weight rooms that was either at basement level or partially underground, and they found an entire walled-off room stocked with supplies from the early Cold War era that no one had remembered. So maybe the supposed tunnel system under the football field was a bit of a stretch, but there definitely were hidden shelter/stockroom areas that had been forgotten about. Edit. The bomb shelter found while renovating had supplies from the early Cold War era, not specifically World War II, but the conspiracy rumors had been pretty dang close. Story number 2, that there was this weird closet built into the middle of the hallway. Yup, the middle, so you had to walk around a giant block of a closet, but the door was always locked. Every morning before the bell rang, we'd meet up by the closet block because it was close to our lockers. The rumor was that it was full of mold because our school was underfunded and gross, but I figured it was just janitorial supplies. I had never seen a janitor go in there though, but why would they leave a closet full of mold? Plus, there was already a room that was full of mold, the old boiler room, which was underground and hadn't been used in decades. Then, one day, the door was unlocked. And there was mold. So much mold. Multiple stacks of German textbooks were rotting inside this closet. The pages were wavy and stuck together. The whole thing was covered in black spots with a white dust on top. The closer you got to the bottom of the stack, the more uniform the books became. They had literally melted together and dried. Lord knows how many times. I simply closed the door and said, "Well guys, I guess this is why we only have Spanish as our foreign language." Story number 3. English teacher who was close with students, not in a pervy way, but more like he was a fellow student instead of an authority figure, was hosting weekend poker parties with his closest students where he would serve booze and weed. One weekend, someone prank called the cops claiming one of these parties was happening. They went to his place and there was one happening as described, but with adult content on every TV in the house. The teacher was immediately fired, had his license revoked, and disappeared for a couple of years. Students tried protesting the firing because, well, he was the cool guy who gave them weed and booze. According to social media stalking, he's back teaching English at a high school a few hours south of my hometown now. Edit. We absolutely thought the dude was a perv once the story broke that there was adult content involved. Everyone just thought he just kinda wanted kids to think he was cool before the real story came out. Story number 4. When I was in 9th grade, my friend told me that there were 2 teachers with funny names. One was Mr. Neck, which I knew, the other was Mr. Head, and his first name was Richard. I told her to shut up, it's probably a stupid rumor, like the rumor that there's a pool on the 3rd floor. No parent would be cruel enough to name their kid that anyway. Well, the next year, Mr. Richard Head was my biology teacher. He was a nice guy. I absolutely adored him. His wife worked in the office, she was great too, and I ended up working with his stepdaughter a few summers later. She told me he was Richard Head III. Oh, don't you just love it when people pass down awful, terrible names? Like, oh, I suffered, so my son is going to suffer, and my son after me is going to suffer. It's just such a great, beautiful tradition, isn't it? And also, we've gotten quite a few high school and school-related stories recently on the channel. I suppose you guys really like these, don't you? I like them too. But also, if anyone says that this is AI, by the way, in the comment section, I will punch them in the throat. You have been warned. Anyway, next story. Story number 5. There were rumors about a music teacher and a student, but they were both pretty dramatic people and did very little to dismiss the talk. So half the school wanted to believe it for the salacious thrill, and half just waved it off as attention-seeking and crap-talking. Well, the teacher got canned without explanation. Most of us just figured it was budget-related. A math teacher filled in on his music/theater roles, and years later, I randomly caught up with the student and she said that the rumors were true. She freaked out and tried to end things to shake off the reputation, and eventually, the teacher showed up trashed and naked on her family's front lawn in the rain, yelling out for her. Like a really effed up version from Say Anything, but with less boombox and more drenched wiener. Story number 6. My algebra teacher was having an online affair. She would teach for about 5 minutes and then tell us to read to ourselves and do our work while she typed away on her computer. One day, she just didn't show up. Turns out she up and left in the middle of the night to move out to Ohio to be with her internet boyfriend. Pretty mild, but I grew up in a town of 700 of people or so it was huge news. Also, our volleyball/track coach sleeping with senior girls. There was even a fist fight about 2 girls over this. I didn't really pay much attention until I got into high school and I joined track. He had me doing weird stretches when he was directly behind me while I was bent over. I was super innocent and fairly dumb about sex. I knew it was creepy, but I just rolled with it, although I was uncomfortable. One of the boys on the track team, who I swore hated me because he was always picking on me, pulled me aside and told me what the coach was doing was perverted, and he was clearly excited the whole time. This kid went to the principal in my defense, and the coach resigned the next year. I don't believe he was ever caught, but after he resigned, I learned his wife was a former student of his, and their relationship started while she was in high school. Edit. I'm not sure the kid really liked me. He was a year older than me, and he went out of his way to make fun of me, but was my older cousin's best friend. I was probably looked at more as an annoying little sister type, even though I rarely initiated speaking to him. He did make it a point to start standing behind me, with his back turned to me, or watch over as I did my stretches with my back to the wall. I think he was just watching out for me for my cousin. He never tried anything or asked me out. He was more annoyed I went along without asking questions as to why the coach was having me do some clearly shady crap. Story number 7. Boy, do I have a good one. We had a substitute teacher that was an older gentleman. He had his hair parted to one side and a legit Hitler-style mustache. Everyone always made fun of him for it and gave him crap. Guy always brushed it off and smirked about it. One day, a group was talking to our principal, who was former military. Someone made a joke about said substitute teacher, and our principal dropped his smile and became very serious and said, "If you guys only knew what that man went through in Vietnam. He was former Army SF and ran Black Ops, and he doesn't let anything get to him anymore." And everyone stopped joking about him and treated him with more respect than ever before, but it was never confirmed. One day, after school, I asked him if he was prior Army SF in Vietnam, and it turns out he was a former MAC-V SOG operator that ran Black Ops in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos against the NVA and Viet Cong. And if you don't know what or who MAC-V SOG operators were, please take 5 minutes and research them or listen to a podcast with surviving operators. It'll change your entire thought on what bravery and heroism is. So, I did a few minutes of research into these guys for you, and they sound pretty badass. It stands for Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. These were operators from elite units such as Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Air Force Commandos, and CIA operatives. Their missions were highly classified and often involved extreme danger with a high casualty rate. And what did they do? Well, let me tell you. Strategic reconnaissance, unconventional warfare, rescue missions, capturing enemy prisoners, and they did psychological warfare, psyops, good grief. And they were seen as critical and pivotal to the Vietnam War. But still, a Hitler mustache? Look, if the teacher did all of that, then God bless him, he's earned it. But a light stubble looks good on anybody, I'm just saying. Anyway, next story. Story number 8. Oh boy, let me tell you the tale of crap legs. One of my friend's older sister, who went to our high school 5 years before we did, was at a party and wound up drunkenly hooking up with a guy. Apparently, she was feeling adventurous and decided to try behind intercourse. Cue them finishing, him pulling out, and her proceeding to release a geyser of crap of Old Faithful level proportions. Crap on the bed, crap all over their clothes, crap all over themselves. It was like that scene in the live-action 101 Dalmatians when Glenn Close falls into the molasses. Understandably embarrassed and not wanting to leave via the normal route through the still very active house party, she hastily decides to leave via the second floor window without even taking the time to put on her clothes. She jumps, breaks her legs on the front door stairs below, and is stranded, naked, and covered in crap on the front lawn. I should mention that this was during the height of a Canadian winter and negative 20 degrees. With nowhere to go and urgent care needed before she passed out from the shock and froze to death, she was left with no recourse but to knock on the door and crawl back into the party of 100 of her peers to phone an ambulance. We thought our friend was lying until 6 of our older friends who were there confirmed it. Story number 10. Not in high school, but it was in elementary. There was this conspiracy that somewhere near our school there is an abandoned 2-story old creepy house. In the residential lot, there was also an external restroom locked. Few people living nearby can hear strange noises at night coming from it. Common hearsays states that a strange person is living inside there with nothing to eat but his own fecal excursions, with his slippers as his dinner plate. So we decided to check it out on our noon breaks and got into the lot. The locked restroom only had ventilation by decorative blocks that had decorated holes on it, so we could only peek a little. We got something to climb on and peek into the holes, and there it was. There was a really strange man living inside of it, walls covered in nothing but feces, emitting a very foul odor. The man started screaming and threw his fecal matter onto the walls. We started to bolt the F out of there and never came back since. It turns out that the man had some violent mental disorders and that the family decided to lock him up in there. I think the neighbors were the ones that fed him. Poor man. I do not know what his status is now, as it's been a long time ago and it's too vague to remember. Story number 11. There was a conspiracy about this student who was a weed dealer. Apparently, he hid his stash in the band room drum closet. He was a band kid and got expelled for something unrelated. It is said he was unable to retrieve his stash. Fast forward about 10 to 13 years, the drumline and I were practicing in the band room. The student playing bass drum 3 enters the closet to retrieve a new pair of sticks after breaking the crap out of his own. He throws the broken stick at the ceiling in an attempt to get it stuck in the tile, and the ceiling tile falls out, and lo and behold, around 2 ounces of cannabis. The bag was incredibly dusty, one of the corners had been chewed by a mouse, but the weed was inside and a bit moldy, but there it was, in all its glory. The rumors were true. We, being dumb high school kids, decided to smoke some that looked like it didn't have any mold on it. There was, and the 3 of us puked, and one of us had a mold allergy and their throat closed up, forcing us to call an ambulance. All of us ended up okay, except for bass drum 3 dude. Years later, he fell off of a rock climbing wall and landed funny. He unfortunately passed away due to his injuries a few days after falling, but the conspiracy was true. Story number 12. My elementary principal was rumored to be cheating on his wife with one of the lunch monitors. The rumor was that a student caught them in the janitor's closet together. This rumor went on for a couple of years. Then there were rumors that the principal was stealing money from the school. We were a very underfunded school in a middle-class neighborhood. The students put on fundraisers for years trying to raise money to fix the entire building. We raised all the money and then nothing was being done. Keep in mind, these are fundraisers that teachers worked overtime for free on. Students and parents were organizing after school. There was a lot of people involved. So everyone waited about a year. Mind you, with a lot of talk during that year. Then someone raised suspicions to the school board, I'm guessing because he was investigated. If my memory serves me right, they let him finish the rest of the school year. And during that year, him and the lunch monitor he was cheating with were caught in his car super early before the school opened. She was giving him head in a school parking lot. I know all of this because my best friend's mom was working for the school. Story number 13. We were one of only 2 private girls-only schools in our county, but we were a small school with not a lot of money, and the other school was much larger and more prestigious. They had an orangery on the grounds. Though they still saw us as enough of a threat that on our open days, their head mistress would come along and idly mention to parents that she'd heard our school was in dire financial straits and would be shutting down soon. A lot of these parents panicked and did exactly as she planned, transferring their daughters into the other school, which eventually led to our school losing students and money and shutting down for 4.5 weeks into the school year when I was 14. My year was the largest in the school when it closed down, with just 20 pupils. The school shutting down made the local news, and various people were asked to give comment, like parents, board trustees, and other head teachers. When the head mistress of the other school was asked to give comment, she said, "It's very sad to hear, but this does mean that my school is now the only girls-only school in the county." Her school was quick to offer girls at my school places, which meant being made to sit an entrance exam, which they had little preparation for. Then, immediately afterwards, their parents were pressured into signing a contract saying they would send their daughters there. A lot of the younger girls and their parents got taken in this way, but they passed on what had happened to them to the parents of the older girls like me, who were wise to how this school operated. By the time she tried it on my mom, saying that I'd have to take the entrance exam immediately after finishing my last day at school and then immediately sign the contract, my mom just said, "I'm not putting my daughter through that." I didn't particularly like the school I ended up at, but I'm still so thankful I didn't end up at the other girls' school. All the girls I knew who went there said it was toxic, and they were bullied. And about a year ago, they had to take on male pupils for the first time to keep up numbers and funds. And I was quietly smug. Only girls only school in the county? Absolute bollocks. Story number 14. At the high school I graduated from, one of the teachers at our school was a teacher that literally almost every student liked. When I was in my sophomore year of high school, I actually honestly found him a little too likable, particularly with girls. I remember thinking he was so open with students, especially girls, because he secretly had a crush on them. I mentioned it to other students, and some other ones agreed with me, while others thought I was full of crap. He would have a female student alone in his room before school, at lunch, and after school, and he had that type of personality that made students comfortable. It got to a point where it was a legitimate conspiracy theory, with many of his biggest fans raging against us for coming up with the theory. Well, 3 years after I graduated from high school, a student who had just graduated from the same high school confessed that she was dating and having a sexual relationship with this teacher for the entire school year they were together. When word got out about this, the teacher took his own life in his own damn car. To this day, he was one of the most effective teachers I've ever had in my life, but there was no excusing what he did. It tore me apart when I heard the news. Story number 15. At the high school I went as a teen, there was a rumor that the school had a one sacrifice per year curse. This meant that every year, one person died due to some weird circumstances revolving around the school grounds. Well, every year, a person did die. Sometimes a student, sometimes a teacher, but every year the curse continued. Most of the times it was a cardiac arrest, but there was even a self-unaliving by hanging in the bathroom. As far as I know, the curse is still going on to this day. Even though I finished being a high school student more than 5 years ago, it does not affect those who are not on the school grounds anymore, but only to those who are still an active student or teacher. And to top it all off, the same high school is well known for being both an asylum for mental patients before and after World War I and a war hospital during World War II. Eastern Europe, if anyone is interested. Okay, so we can all agree that we need to shut that school down. What? Someone dies every year, teacher or student? OP said most of the time it was cardiac arrest, but maybe something's in the food or the water, or maybe like someone who believes in the sacrifice a little too much is just targeting one particular person every year, thinking, oh, this fat guy, he's gonna get it because we have to keep the evil haunted school happy. Shut it down, blow it up, like burn it. I don't know, just make a new school, please. Anyway, next story. Story number 16. The shop teacher always creeped us out, but there was absolutely no obvious reason why. There were rumors that he was inappropriate with girls, but nobody confirmed it while I was there. Well, one of the boys I went to school with finally went to the cops about 10 years after we graduated. Turns out Mr. Hardman, seriously that is his name, was grooming, essaying, and essaying boys for years. He was a teacher when our parents were kids. One of the longest standing staff there. So it split up the community. More boys and grown men like the original guy came forward with their stories, and many of our parents and grandparents called them all liars. Because surely he couldn't be gay? They didn't care about the essaying part, just the potential that he's gay. It was so effing bizarre. The cops showed up to arrest him and he took his own life. Glad he's gone, but man, he should have had to face his crimes. Then after he died, much of the loser community blamed these boys for killing an innocent teacher. F you, Mr. Hardman. I hope you're rotting. Story number 17. When I moved to a small town, there was a rumor that some guy would dress up in a gorilla costume and beat and SA women, even as young as 16. Thought it was a myth, but sure enough, I saw the guy at our school prep rally. He was chasing a group of teenagers until one of the basketball coaches went behind him, grabbed him by the neck, and shoved him to the ground. The coach tried to hold him down until the cops came. Somehow, the gorilla guy was able to break free and escape off to the wooded area behind the high school. This was strange, as the coach had to be anywhere from 6'4", 230, 250 pounds with a beer gut, but pretty muscular, and the gorilla guy only had to be about 6'2" maybe, with most people saying he had to be about 180 to 200 pounds. Hard to tell with the costume. FBI eventually came to our school and questioned a lot of people. I never heard about if he ever got caught or not, but it was the last time I heard about the gorilla guy. Story number 18. At my high school building, there was a big square with a courtyard in the center. There was a utilities tunnel that ran under the whole building. Think of the creepy place you see in horror movies. There were a bunch of rooms attached to the tunnel, mostly used for storage of old crap that hadn't been touched in decades. No students were allowed in the tunnel for obvious reasons, but during the day, the doors were unlocked so staff could get in if they wanted, and of course, students would use it as a shortcut around the building and to smoke. None of the rooms attached to the tunnel were locked, even the boiler room with the steam boilers, except there was one locked room down there. The rumor was that this was set up as a bedroom that the teachers would use to have sex with each other. Turns out, that was true, and it was exposed when one teacher went to the cops after another took her down there and SA'd her. Story number 19. While I was was in high school, there were rumors of, inappropriate and unprofessional behavior from teachers. Not necessarily in a sexual way, but definitely inappropriate and unprofessional regardless. Hell, I witnessed teachers cussing at kids and making loads of inappropriate comments about them. Some teachers were definitely, too close with the students. There was a trans girl with a rather unflattering nickname, and one of my sister's teachers told her that the trans girl got her nickname after a botched attempt at the behind intercourse. Other teachers were rumored to drink with students. One of them was my marching band instructor. I somehow didn't pick up on it at the time. I was 15 and oblivious, but he was abusing the girl who often stood next to me during warm-ups. And I remember I got chased out of his office once. He kept extra supplies like gloves in there if we needed them, and basically gave us permission to walk in and get the gloves anytime we liked. Then he got followed in by a group of angry dads who were not happy to see a female-appearing student alone in his office. Not long after that, he was arrested, and he eventually got sent to prison. You'd think that would be a one-off incident, and it would be at most schools. Rumors circled for years about some teachers having relationships with students, and many of them either quietly got fired or they got arrested and then very publicly got fired. It became something my school was notorious for, other than all the bomb threats. And the year before my freshman year, an English teacher allegedly got fired for spiking the punch bowl at prom. Story number 22. I had a few. One guy got busted for CP content after he filmed a video of another guy getting a beer bottle shoved up his ass and distributed it to the whole popular block of the school. It started as a rumor until I dug up the file on him from my friend at the local SD. Effed up stuff. Victim kid was never the same and struggled to even talk to anyone in school after that, which was a shame because he was a decent guy. Another kid was thought to be stealing phones because we had a series of phone thefts, one of which hit my friend. I told the resource officer that we all knew who the F it was, but she refused to do anything about it. I traced my friend's phone signal to this dude's address, showed the resource officer, and told her if she didn't radio for someone to search the place, I would call the SD and get their asses involved. She reluctantly agreed, and sure as crap, the kid had $30,000 worth of phones in his room, not all of which were returned to their owners, unfortunately. My friend got his back, though. Had one theory start that a lot of the more attractive teachers were gangbanging in the teacher's lounge. It was suspiciously soundproofed, had 3 padlocks, and sort of was like an airlock-style door, where you went through one door and then another right after. Well, one of my buddies thought it would be a funny story to tell if he caught the teachers in the act and messed with the locks so they didn't actually work, so he could enter anytime he wanted before it was noticed. So, the art teacher, the younger petite chick who was a little more than mildly attractive but not model status by any means, as well as the year 8 German teacher who was very attractive, tall ginger who had a decent figure but a very petite face and never wore a bra, were getting dirty with the year 8 history teacher, a youngish dude who was very full of himself, and he managed to get a picture. He never sent the picture to anyone, but he did show it to me. Then the one that really set off alarms, nobody actually believed the school's security cameras worked. I thought it was bullcrap. Turns out, it wasn't. I got into a fight with 4 students because one of them decided it would be funny to run up and jump kick me in the back. I handled my own until the teacher showed up and immediately accused me of starting it, and I told her to watch the security camera that was facing directly in the direction of our altercation from start to finish. She said she would, and I got pulled into the dean's office and the dean accused me of starting it yet again, and I once again brought up the camera. She said that she had checked it and I clearly started the fight. I told her to show me the video. She refused, but I had 4 witnesses, thank God, who stood by me, watched the other 4 start crap, watched them get their asses handed to them, and when it made scuttlebutt that I might get expelled, they spoke up, saved my ass, and I left that school after that year. Started online school. Story number 24. A lot of this came out the year I graduated, or in the years after I graduated. It was well known that the male Spanish teacher put all the bustier girls in the front row of his class if you wore a low-cut shirt the first day of class. I was lucky and did not wear a low-cut shirt the first day of class. He was also known for looking up girls' skirts if they were sitting in the front row. Then there was the driving teacher who was SAing female students during driving classes. The school did nothing except say that female students had to be paired up with male students in the driving portions, thinking that would stop it. Then one male gym teacher was rumored to have a horse chicken. Turned out to be true after multiple guys confirmed this gym teacher would shower in full view of the male students in the locker room. Then another male gym teacher was fired after having an affair with a girl in my grade. This girl was unfortunate enough to have a literal pig face and known for being rude to everyone. So it only got worse after the rumors and eventual confirmation got around. Prior to this, the teacher had been well liked by most students since he wasn't the stereotypical gym teacher. He just wanted everyone to try and do the best they could. Was also very understanding if you were sick or injured and would let you sit out. Then, the female gym teacher got caught having a lesbian relationship with some of her student athletes after school. She ended up divorced from her husband and fired. By the way, we only had 5 gym teachers, so 3 out of 5 being weirdos and pervs was really disappointing. Then, my physics/chemistry male teacher had an affair with another teacher, while his wife worked like one hallway over. He ended up quitting after it all came out. And finally, not in high school, but in middle school, it was known that our math teacher was banging the smoking hot health teacher. Neither were married, so it wasn't a scandal until one of the male students found her thong on the classroom floor, confirming in our minds that they were definitely having sex in the classroom. Story number 25. Biology teacher had an affair with the English teacher on a 3-day outdoor school-type hiking class for seniors. Got caught, his wife divorced him, but her husband forgave her, and they stayed married. Then there's the shop teacher who smoked weed with his students on a regular basis. Then, as a rural school a far ways away from the other major centers of population, our district has this mysterious revolving door phenomenon. This being where girls as young as 7th grade would start attending the school, quickly found out to be pregnant, and once they had their babies, they'd move back to wherever they called home. I seriously doubt this was a planned conspiracy, but more than one pro-life family had apparently had the same idea of treating our schools as border institutions for pregnant teens. Then, some idiot went around saying that one teacher had cancer and had less than a year to live, at 40 or something, simply because her hair had quickly grayed. Turns out she did have cancer, but it was treated and not severely impacting her life. She still taught. Continuing, there was the teacher in charge of student government frequently cooking the books so that her favorites would win if it was within a semi-plausible 10-point spread. Then, another different biology teacher was supposedly a weekend nudist. She technically was a fan of going to nude hot springs in the area, but that hardly made her a nudist. One of her students had stumbled across her bathing one weekend, apparently. There was yet another biology teacher that got fired/forcibly resigned for teaching about evolution to his students in the year 2006 or so. Then, it was no great secret, but all the teachers who coached sports basically only had to work a half day for the same salary as their full-time counterparts. The principal was the football coach, so... Then it was said that they burned down the old middle school/high school as fire department practice, but people speculated that either A, it was an arson attack disguised as practice, we lived in a town where an eco-terrorist bombed our first McDonald's, or B, a ridiculous attempt to cover up the asbestos/maintenance issues that the district had lied to parents about for decades. But it turns out it was C, a ploy to make the resulting land so undesirable for residential development that the city government would be able to buy it for under market prices. Then there was the substitute PE teacher who was a gay predator who the district refused to fire because he was somehow related via marriage to someone who worked at the superintendent's office. He would leer at us teen boys in the locker room every time he came. Then there was a rumor that a female PE teacher was a lesbian. She was a lesbian. Then the female SPED teacher was a lesbian, but she was actually just living her best single life, and students had created a fake lurid dating profile on a lesbian website. Then an old male art teacher was quickly retired after rumors began circulating about him effing his former female students. Continuing, supposedly we ran out of funding when building our new school and couldn't afford a pool, but magically, the high school principal has enough money to buy a Maserati that very same year construction is complete. Then, the band teacher literally threw his instruments at students for years, and no one did anything about it because he was a very talented musician, but horrible teacher. Continuing, when we had fire drills, every time the police department arrived with canine dogs to sniff all of our lockers for pot. Multiple people got caught before we realized the trend. And finally, literally so much else that I can't remember the details of because I haven't spoken to any of my high school friends in over a decade. Bunch of traumatized psychos we were. Probably best we tried to go our separate ways and heal from the insane experiences that is high school in a part of rural America that borders meth country. Story number 26. We had a kid in our school who was a good friend of mine who claimed repeatedly that the school nurse who was in her 30s and married wanted to F him and how she was absolutely obsessed with him, etc. Then later he said that they had sex. Obviously bullcrap, except when he was 17, he showed up at a party with a video of him effing the nurse, and he recorded a phone call where she begged him to drop out of school, move to Canada with her, and said she'd pay for everything and support him. In the phone call, he asked about her husband, and she just said, F him, let's just go. And he said something about her needing to get divorced, and she said she would kill her husband if he wanted so they could take his life insurance policy she had talked to him into getting earlier that year so they'd be set when they left together. He ended up ending things with her after that, and she lost her crap and threatened him, saying that she would tell the cops he SA'd her if he didn't run away with her. He sent her the videos he'd taken, and she quit her job at the school a few days later and moved without saying a word to anyone. The principal had a feeling something had happened because apparently that nurse used to call him out of class all the time, supposedly to help with his diabetes insulin stuff, and he had a feeling something had happened between them, and the principal told him she disappeared without a trace and said nothing to anyone, and her husband was worried. He also said the cops had her phone records showing she was calling and texting him all the time, with the majority of their messages coming from her. He never told them anything. Crap is crazy. Story number 27. For some of my high school career, I attended an all-boys Catholic school. By that sentence alone, you probably know where I'm going with this already, but I was having a falling out with religion at this time. Depressed, not doing very well at school or life, but other kids around me evidently were worse off. There were a number of kids that ended themselves the 3 years I attended there, which of course to me was troubling. There was no way kids should have been dropping left and right like that. The cynic, depressed, recently atheist kid I was realized something was up, something effed up. Having days off for funerals seemed oddly common to me. How unceremonious it was, and how it seemed we just got back to business as usual when it was over was curious to say the least. Some people thought it was stress-related. Others thought the kids were gay and couldn't handle coming out. Either of those may have been true in some cases, but I and a few other skeptics always theorized the worst. Especially those of us who took after-school hour side jobs working to clean the building. There were definitely occasions we found some things that were alarming, like kegs of hidden beer in the areas where only the brothers were allowed to go. Quite a few of us noted the questionable behavior of some of the brothers. The jokes about them grooming kids were ever present. I graduated from there 11 years ago, and then 5 years ago, a story came out. And it turns out we were right. When the story came out, a bunch of us who thought it was going on contacted each other for the first time since we graduated to say, I effing knew it! And sadly, we did. I have no doubts in my mind that it still happens to this day. Story number 29. My vice principal was a creeper. The kind of sick F that really cared about the dress code when girls were concerned, even bringing out a ruler to measure skirt length and chest exposure. He looked like a cross between Professor Frink and Egon Spengler. He even sounded a bit like Jerry Lewis from Nutty Professor. One time, this girl in my art class, who was rather well endowed, did a self-portrait of herself as a topless mermaid. He confiscated the painting and had it in his office for like the majority of the school year until her parents demanded to get the painting. After I graduated, I took an overnight job at a video store and saw him come in a lot. Dude was there at least 3 to 4 nights a week, hitting the booth or renting old/young or teacher/school girl-themed videos or buying up the same themed magazines. After I finally moved out of state, I caught up with some friends on MySpace and they said he got canned a couple of years later for creeping on girls at school. Big effing surprise. Story number 30. It was actually my secret. I've been a teacher for over 20 years and in my 20s wasn't quite over my party phase of life. Anyways, rumors started going around the school that I was a drug addict, selling drugs in school, etc. I wasn't a drug addict, just a casual weekend warrior that smoked weed and did MDMA at parties. But yeah, it was every weekend, from Friday to Sunday, that I partied for about the first 4 years of my teaching career. I was never stoned in class, and being in my 20s, come-downs were so mild as to not be noticeable. I was very responsible when it came to my job. I've always been very strictly personal about how I behave in front of children. The students found out, though, that it was true when 2 of them snuck into a dance night at a nightclub and were themselves taking MDMA. I met them there, and if you've ever done ecstasy, you know it just can't be hidden. It's extremely obvious you are high. But they were underage and just as scared of it getting out that they did that it wasn't something that they were going to report. But yeah, after that weekend, everyone knew what I was up to, including the staff. The principal, an old school hippie in the 60s, just told me to never let it affect my performance, and it would stay as something that is my business alone. Funnily enough, the majority of teachers my age were doing similar things. What students don't get about teachers is that in our 20s, in our party phase of life, we're generally doing crazier things than they are because we have a job that pays well and has lots of holidays. While in class we may be professional and clean cut, we go pretty nuts when we blow off steam because we build up a lot during the week. Story number 31. A teacher was banging his students for extra credit. Some 30-year-old man effing 15 to 16-year-old girls. It was a juicy rumor as a high schooler. Supposedly, he was caught by a staff member when she found a note in the trash in his handwriting asking for a female to come over to his house for extra credit. Of course, it was just a rumor. It didn't help, though, that he suddenly became very absent in those days. It didn't help that a lot of the hot girls were defending him pretty religiously, particularly the ones that were in his class. And it didn't help that he suddenly became incredibly patriotic and wanted to leave on a deployment when he was practically being interrogated at that point, as he was currently in the National Guard. Years later, after it all faded away, I met one of the girls at a bar and just blatantly asked her if the rumors were true, as we were talking about our high school days. And well, yup, she was laughing and smiling and such. She said to me, like, "Oh yeah, dude, he would fail me and I would come over and suck him off and then we would have sex and he would pass me," and a bunch of other vulgar stories. Dude would apparently fail pretty girls and then drill them for a higher grade. Then it just turned into sex and a free A+. Story number 32. Two rumors that turned out to be true. Mid-70s, high school. The hot first-year English teacher worked her way through college as a stripper. Yup, confirmed by my uncle when he re-met her at one of our basketball games. They had known each other for years, and sadly, she wasn't my English teacher. She was smoking. Then, the valedictorian was in Playboy's Girl of the Pac-10 issue our senior year. She was both already 18 and taking college classes at ASU before graduating from our high school. She was scary smart, incredibly kind, and super hot. Ended up working for Lehman Bros and helped invent high-frequency trading. She probably owns a private island by now. And one that turned out to be not true, that our incredible, amazing principal was a drunk. No, he had early-stage MS and had difficulties talking. Eventually, he had to retire early, but he almost beat MS and survived until his 90s. Story number 33, that one of the teachers was seducing the female students. Mostly said because the girls would turn down guys, but hang around him all the time. Eventually, he tried to make out with a girl who wasn't interested in him in the school library, and she went straight to her parents, who then went to the cops. They escorted him out of class a week later and didn't say a word as to why. When I finally brought it up with my sister, who attended the same school 10 years prior to me, she said, "Finally, but I'm not surprised it took this long because he's hot." A couple of girls I'm still friends with also had some stories about him, but didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to get involved. He did it for roughly 20 years as far as I can tell, since I attended that school in 2011, and my sister did in 2001. But one of my nephews currently attends it. As far as I know, he's no longer a teacher there. But everyone agrees it's sad that it went on for so long because his wife was also a teacher at the school and supposedly had no idea. Story number 34. So, I was in class with this guy who used to steal chemicals from the lab in high school, and then he would proudly tell us he was working on creating fireworks with it. So, during one break, he would set one off. This one was like a smoke bomb, which seemed innocent enough, but it did fill a whole street with smoke for multiple minutes. The worst one was when during a break, people used to walk towards the supermarket to get some food or snacks. Once off school terrain, this guy told us with a smirk he had another firework. Before we could say anything, he ran towards the closest building, which happened to be a religious community building. He lit it and ran away. What followed was the biggest bang I've ever heard from fireworks. At first, it seemed harmless again, but then we saw someone surrounded by many others. He had this 10 by 30 centimeter metal piece sticking out of his upper arm, and he seemed to both be still taken with shock and surprised, and slowly started turning white and weak. I remember seeing a piece of metal fly by my head just a half a meter separated from me, and to this day, I praise myself lucky I'm still alive. The news went over the whole school that same day, and that night I was called by police to come in and be interviewed and what I knew, and I told them this whole story. They in turn told me that he had indeed used chemicals together with folded pieces of metal and fireworks string to get the thing lit. This is what they classify as a pipe bomb and is obviously highly illegal. After all of this, we started calling our guy Tom the Bomb. He was moved to a school where people go that also performed some over-the-line illegal actions. The dude with the metal piece in his arm was hospitalized, and his family claimed money from Tom the Bomb, and I believe his arm function never returned to 100%. If I wouldn't have experienced this all firsthand, I wouldn't have believed it to be, and ever rather had it be, a conspiracy. May this post be simultaneously a warning and show some preliminary signaling for this type of people. Tom the Bomb never intentionally wanted to hurt anyone, but it could have all been prevented. Story Story number 35. There were two conspiracy theories in my high school that turned out to be true. They were more rumors than anything, but still interesting. The first was the rumor that our high school had these secret classrooms underground that had secret access in some utility closet that they supposedly did some crazy studies with in the past. I brought this rumor up to my uncle, who also attended that high school 10 years prior, as well as my parents 15 years before. Much to my surprise, my uncle, who is now an electrician, had to go inside of those underground classrooms to rewire some portions of the school after a remodel. Sadly, they weren't anything nefarious, but instead atomic bomb shelters that were outfitted with classrooms in the event of nuclear war with Russia built into the school in the late 50s. There originally was a staircase that could be used to access the lower level of the school, but they filled it in with brick and made a closet out of it, with a locked door blocking access in the back. Super cool, really. The other conspiracy was that one of the teachers was a Chippendale before teaching. I actually had this teacher and just casually asked them if it was true. They said yes. Back in the 80s, they were going to school in California and needed to make some extra cash, so their sister somehow got them the gig. Apparently paid well. Story number 36. A senior at my high school wrote an article about major discrepancies in missing money from the school budget in our school newspaper. Her first article claimed that thousands of dollars were unaccounted for, and she questioned what happened to those funds. At the time, not many people really paid too much attention to this, since everyone figured that maybe there were some small errors with the school's record keeping or whatnot. Week after week, she uncovered that more and more money was missing, and the number soon hit six figures. The media soon gained interest in the story, and as more and more people became involved and were conducting their own independent investigations, it turned out that high-level members of our school district, i.e. principals and especially the district superintendent, were embezzling money from the school budget for years. The amount of money embezzled quickly went from six figures to the millions. You might be familiar with this story, as it was recently made into a film called Bad Education on HBO. I believe I was a sophomore when this all started, and this really shook the community we lived in, Long Island, New York, and I remember my mom being extremely upset because every year the school board would vote to increase the school budget, which ultimately meant higher taxes for residents. My parents, both immigrants to this country, were super hardworking and worked tirelessly to be able to move from the 5 boroughs to the suburbs to provide the best education for my sister and I. And here were some already wealthy a-holes blatantly stealing from the community. Story number 37. My suburban primary school was surrounded by a dense forest, and rumor had it that a man lived in those woods. A sports field sat between the main playground and the forest. Every lunchtime, we played a game of chicken to see who would run across the field and reach the forest before being caught by the dinner ladies. One time, my friend actually made it across, avoiding detection, and when he returned, he was visibly shaken. He claimed he saw the man in the woods and that the man had called out to him, asking my friend to have a look at his treehouse. Obviously, my friend freaked out and ran back to us. We ran straight to the dinner ladies to report it, but they laughed and brushed us off, praising our vivid imaginations. And before long, all the kids in the playground were talking about the man in the woods. Rumors spread that he had long, limp hair and a bushy beard, and that if you ever saw him, you should run because he ate children. We decided that to convince the adults we needed proof, and we hatched a plan that a group of us would enter the woods after school to look for him. By this point, our parents would wait in the car for us after school, so we had 10 to 15 minutes to run through the forest before we needed to be back at the car. A group of us did this for just under a week, grabbing the biggest sticks we could find and clearing a section of the forest each day. During playtime, we would meet up and decide what the plan was for that day and speculate on where the man in the woods was hiding. And we hadn't had any luck so far, and morale was dipping. We were beginning to think it may have just been a rumor after all, and our friend was lying. We decided to go back in one last time before giving up, and we thought it would be best to split up into groups of 2. This way we could clear the remaining forest area in one trip. I got stuck with the kid that had seen him originally. He was convinced he was still out there. Picking up sticks, we headed out after the final bell and made our way through the forest. Just as we were about to head back to our parents, we entered a clearing that had some signs of life. We found an old fire pit, a sleeping bag, and some dirty clothes. Seeing these things, we freaked out and ran straight out of the forest and back to our parents. This was on a Friday, so when we went back in on Monday, we reported it to the head teacher, who firstly told us off for going into the woods after school, before agreeing to go and take a look. The head came back later and said he'd found nothing and accused us of lying, but we knew the truth. Rumors spread and we decided to never go back into the woods again. A few years went by and I was in my final year of primary school, when one day as we were leaving, we saw a bunch of police officers heading into the woods with sniffer dogs. dogs. The school was closed for a few days after because apparently a pupil had been assaulted by a homeless man living in the woods. This is 100% true, and I'm really thankful that nothing bad happened to me or my friends. It's kind of scary thinking back on it. The staff should have listened, but this was in the 90s, and things were pretty lax. Story number 38. A student in our middle school died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. He was quite popular for being an incredibly intelligent and kind-hearted kid. Because we lived in a small town, it made headlines for weeks. A rumor went around that the police reported there was a handprint on the kid's face and his neck at an odd angle. So the idea was that everyone thought he was murdered. Because he was only in 7th grade, you don't really make enemies, so naturally the family were suspects, namely the stepfather of the kid. The stepfather worked as a substitute teacher at our school, and he has subbed for my classes multiple times. He was already known for being one of the meanest subs out there. In my personal experience, I remember him cussing and yelling at me in front of the class for talking with my friends while doing a group assignment. So he was well known for having anger management issues, but nothing came out of the police reports, so the case was dropped. A couple of years had passed and the memory of the kid's death was slowly dissipating, until new evidence came to light and the case was reopened. The prime suspect was the stepfather. He was arrested and found guilty for the murder of his stepson. Allegedly, he got into an argument with the kid and pushed him down the stairs, breaking his neck. It's crazy that this guy taught my 2nd grade class. Story number 39. One of the vocational schools near the one I attended had a bit of a reputation, as female students' pictures, anything from bikini pics to straight-up nudes, were floating around both in the school itself and online, with the images in person being passed along by other students. And while it was commonly known that this was a thing, and there would be frequent PSAs about internet safety, nobody seemed to know or spilled the beans on how the images were obtained or initially spread, even though plenty of students were caught sharing pics and got interrogated as a result. This all changed when one of the students in my class went there for an internship to the other school's IT department and was approached by one of the teachers there to partake in the endeavor of obtaining and spreading the aforementioned pictures. Turns out a dozen or so people, primarily IT teachers and admins, were the ones responsible for harvesting pictures from students, either by physically accessing unattended laptops and drives, or doing so when they were turned into the IT department for repair, maintenance, software installs. The news spread like wildfire as the student intended to contact our school's dean to ask for advice on how to deal with the situation, as he had no intention to partake in any of this. However, instead of sending this message to the dean, he misclicked the recipient and ended up sending it to the dean's study group, which included every student that was going to an internship that year. While some students were expelled and some teachers and staff quit overnight, the whole ordeal was covered up as a cyberbullying incident, and people sort of just forgot about it over the years. Though I happen to know a student that was a victim that quit because she and others weren't taken seriously in the face of a serious issue like this. Story number 40. I was sitting in class when a bunch of classmates were in the corner talking about how there was a CS 1.6 server running on the school network. Half of them were like, no way, not knowing I was the one that set it up. I didn't tell anyone. There was an office in the library that was set up to be viewable by every subnet on the network for monitoring student activity that I set up the server on so people from every classroom could play together. At lunch, there was an open lab that the teachers did not watch that we did and didn't care if we played flash games on, and we would play Counter-Strike 1.6 at lunch. Eventually, someone else took the fall for it as we used random people's IDs to log in, as the default password and username was your name and your student number, and you were encouraged to change it. One of the labs was done with the students' IDs for the install. I'm not sure if they found the server or not, as it was still running when I graduated, but the computer would have been replaced ages ago. Then, in high school, I found out that if you logged into the computers and yanked the Ethernet cable right when it started to load your account from the server, it would give you local admin access. The local admin account would be your username, though, and programs would say installed by the person logged in. We found this out as it was common for people to just unplug your crap, as the back of the computer was easily accessible from the person in front of you. Story number 41. So I can't think of any from when I was in school, besides one that I never found out if it's true or not. I graduated 11 years ago. I do have some messed up stuff that's happened at my high school and by leaders in my hometown. I'll start with the one involving a student. In 2018, a 16-year-old girl brought a kitchen knife from home, went to school that morning, and stabbed another girl in the back, literally during breakfast in the cafeteria. She was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Then, a married former resource officer for the high school was seen having sex in the back of his car in broad daylight with someone who is not his wife and is believed to be underage. Then there is the police officer, who was also my second cousin, apparently had other complaints by employees. But the nail in the coffin? He distributed flash drives with dozens of videos of himself having sex. some while in uniform, and the woman was not his wife, and these were sent to his employees. When asked by one of the employees why he gave them those videos, he laughed and said he thought it was funny. Multiple officers and dispatchers went to the mayor's office this past May and said that they are all prepared to quit if the chief isn't fired. The chief resigned the next day. I would just like to say he's my cousin by marriage. Then, our former sheriff was charged and sentenced for stealing money that was seized during arrests and covering it up in conflict of interest. Also, gambling the money and racking up $17,000 in debt. Even while investigating the Rodin family massacre of 8, he was up during the night, most nights, gambling. And then currently, one of my former teachers is accused of sending out racist homework. Story number 42. Way late to this thread here, so this will probably get buried, but we had a massive park backing onto our school that for the most part was used as a shortcut for students who wanted to avoid the bus route. There was a gate at the back of the school leading onto the park. Of course, it was also used to bunk off, go for a walk during lunch, secret snogging spot, and other teenage business. There was a rumor for years that there was a girl who would go over there during lunch break and would offer BJs to the older boys or to any boy who could buy cigarettes. This was during the early 90s when age restriction wasn't really as enforced as it is now. Everybody had heard the rumor, of course, and people took a wild stab at identifying the girl, but nothing was ever confirmed. Then, around a year later after I left school, I had a falling out with a friend because she had been opening her legs to anybody who asked, and was cheating on her boyfriend, who was also my friend, and she was doing it on the DL. She had slept with one of his best friends, but he had a big mouth, and he was bragging about it, and she didn't deny it. This then set off a chain reaction of other boys who had come forward to bragging about getting off with her on the regular basis. And it turns out that she was the one giving BJs out on the park for cigarettes. Story number 43. There was a horse in the bomb shelter/basement. The school was built in the mid-1800s and at one point heated with a coal furnace in the basement. The coal was delivered by horse and pole cart down a coal chute. Horse hooked to cart backed up too far and fell down the chute and was euthanized in the basement, but was too large to be removed. School was converted from coal to natural gas, but furnace was still in the basement. And sure enough, there is a horse skeleton down there. Almost like they left it just so people would actually believe this rumor almost 150 years later. Also, the pool beneath the gym. All the old teachers would mention it in passing, but never would confirm how they knew. The gym teacher was an old family friend and was present when they replaced some boards in the gym floor. Apparently, it was a big deal. By the way, we had a dive team with Olympic members whose parents apparently funded it, but in the 60s and 70s, this was for schools with swim teams to have a pool on site. So one was built, but logistics of repeatedly removing and replacing the floor for use was too much. The complex was built and then never used as a pool, just a new gym. And the gym teacher said he would have never believed it if he hadn't seen it for himself. So with the influx of these high school rumor stories that we've gotten recently, I'm just now realizing so many had a secret pool back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I guess that was just a more common thing back then, I suppose. Also, let's be honest, trusting kids these days with water and a pool, I feel like that'd be a recipe for disaster and drowning and other scandalous things. Anyway, next story. Story number 45. The Phantom Crapper. In grade 10, we had someone laying logs in the boys' bathroom that simply would not flush. A few plugged the toilets and overflowed them, flooding the bathroom floors. They were monstrous, dense beasts, like the thickest, coiled, bumpy summer sausage you could imagine. And I saw one. It was not human. It was like 16 to 24 inches. Pure madness. We encountered the janitor one gym class trying to shake one loose with a mop, and multi-flushes were not successful. He came out of the gym bathroom visibly disturbed, yelling at us, while blaming us for sneaking crap into the toilets and causing him grief. All the while, he was shaking his wet crap mop around, flicking crap droplets on him and all over the gym in his sweaty beet-red face and faded denim overalls. The legend started to grow. Things got so bad that they started making announcements on the intercom. Yeah, announcements on crapping, or not to crap and not to multi-flush, really weird, and it culminated in halfway crap monitors, but they couldn't cover every toilet. The craps kept coming, all the way to graduation. The rumor had it the culprit was a guy in grade 12, let's call him Porter. Dude was a tank, like 350 pounds, probably 5'8". He played football, or tried to, so he was fat big. He had a well-known beef with the janitor as the J-Man, and also helped with the football team. Porter always got mad when the subject came up and always seemed to have an alibi and was never caught. When we came back for grade 11, the janitor was gone and Porter had graduated, and the Phantom Crapper never struck again. Porter ended up playing football for a lower-tier college and partied a lot with his old schoolmates. He ultimately fessed up to the whole thing years later while he was drunk. He said he didn't sneak any horse poo in or anything else, those were his craps. He said he experimented with different foods and found something that bunged him up, but also created a consistent steamy log. He would then chug his 7-Eleven coffee and time his craps around the janitor's smoke breaks. He said he only had one close call when the crap monitors came around when he was coiling. He said he had to stand on the toilet and hold his breath. And it worked. So, thank you for letting me share this. I've kept it bottled up for over 20 years. Story number 46. There were rumors of an inappropriate relationship between one senior student and a Spanish language arts teacher. It turns out that another teacher, a gym teacher, accidentally bumped into the two of them while he was visiting his family in the Dominican Republic. He saw them together while they were having an illicit vacation in Santo Domingo, and when he got back, he reported the whole thing to his superiors and they told him they would handle it. As it turns out, the principal, vice principal, and one other staff member discussed what to do over email, sat on this info, and never reported or handled the matter. The whole thing was exposed when someone at the school was found to be stealing money from the school itself, and the overseeing Department of Education were investigating the matter. They came across the emails, and all the higher-ups lost their jobs. Lovely scenes. Story number 47. This isn't high school, but middle school for me. There was a 6th grade science teacher that just creeped everyone out, but mostly the girls. There were a lot of rumors that he was a pervert, and that he would stare at girls in the halls and in his classroom. He even rubbed my shoulder once while passing as I was sitting in class, and once he also rubbed my earlobe while passing me in the cafeteria during lunch. He was just super creepy. A few years after, while I was in high school, we saw a news report that he had been charged and arrested for possession of CP content. To my knowledge, he is still locked up, but I try not to think about it. It still really creeps me out to think he preyed on 12 to 13-year-old girls by saying really creepy things, invading personal space, and actually had CP content. My young, innocent self overlooked a lot of comments or behaviors that were clear warning signs of this. My mom also worked at the school. He knew this, and he would often be super friendly with her, then creepy with me. What a freak. Story number 48. That one of our teachers was a predator. He didn't usually teach our class, but stood in a good few times while our teacher wasn't in, and somebody else covered his class. All the popular kids, like the bullies and ones who wore their uniform all loose with makeup, loved this guy. He always let them get away with stuff. They could turn up late, eat in class, play music, bully others, not do work, do makeup, wear uniforms however they wanted, and he wouldn't care. He used to be horrible to the rest of us, and he very clearly couldn't be bothered to teach us as a class. He would very, very slowly, like he was bored, tell us what to do, which was usually carry on work from our normal teacher or copy stuff out of a book, then go straight to the back of class and sit with the popular kids and have a laugh with them. If any of us tried to tell another teacher about how he would suddenly act all professional when somebody was coming in to check in on his class, and then they would decide nothing was wrong and stopped checking in. Then he would go psycho at us and treated us worse. After a while of this, him upsetting a few of us with learning difficulties or mental health or shyness, he suddenly started putting the popular kids in detention for turning up late. But they never complained like they'd make a fuss, but you could tell they were pretending to be upset because he would still go sit and chat with them. The rumors spread fast that he was putting on a film, bringing in pop and sweets, chocolate, and other stuff for the popular kids in the detention, and the reason the teacher did nothing is because the kids were known bullies and naughty in most classes. So to them, getting detention was nothing new. Half the school branded him as a predator, the other half thought he was a cool guy. And then some years pass and he leaves the school and nothing else goes on, except all the popular kids are moaning and pouting that he left. Later, after we had left school to start our lives at college or get jobs, there's a news story in the paper saying that this teacher had gone to court and jail for stuff involving an ex-student, specifically this one girl in the last year when he quit. Turns out he had promised to this girl that they would be together when they both left school. He'd groomed her for a long time, but told them they could never ever have sex, else he would be arrested. But I do believe some sexual activities occurred as stated in the paper. He'd given her the old "I will leave my wife for you" line, and then when he left, blocked her out his life according to the police report, and he admitted he knew it was getting out of hand, and thought he could just go back to living his life and forget, and ran away from what he'd done. The girl, who at this point was madly and deeply in love with him and furious that he had cut her off, tracked down his wife and caused so much trouble, and then went off the rails and finally confessed to her family what had happened. Then they eventually raided his house and found enough evidence like underage adult content, his second phone with text messages to the girl, call logs, pictures and videos of her, and other indecent stuff, and other conversations with some of the girls at school. Then he was jailed. Story number 49. The principal was screwing the PE teacher and the Scottish redhead Christian studies teacher. got done with underage material, and also inappropriate with students. No details were given about that. My best friend at the time was a part of it and literally couldn't share anything. It was horrible. They went to court. Then there was my math teacher who was a creep. In year 8, me and my best friend were just having a little fight after lunch. We didn't sit near each other in class, and the teacher notices and tries to act caring and helpful. He says, "Girls, let's go outside and talk," and we're both standing against the brick wall, and he puts his arms beside up both of us and trapping us, and I can still smell his breath. His face was that close. It was just wrong. And oh man, how could I forget he used to linger above our shirts all the time and touch our waists? We tried to report him for a year before he was somehow transferred to a boys' school. Story number 50. My high school had a rumor that one of the science teachers only put the pretty girls up front because he ogled them. I always thought it was ridiculous. That's pretty blatant, and you're going to get attractive students sitting in the front row, and the middle, and the back. There's 30 damn students per room. It's just inevitable, and people are seeing things that aren't really nefarious. Well, I got transferred to his class for the second semester one year since the science teacher I had was going to be teaching the first semester again to students who failed theirs. One day, a pencil fell from his desk, and he asked the girl sitting up front to get it for him since it landed right in front of her desk. And he stared at her as she got up and bent over to pick it up. Kind of gross. But the thing that makes this so bad, though, is I saw him push the pencil off his desk on purpose. I was sitting there towards the back, and I watched him do it. And I believed the rumors after that. Story number 51. My freshman history teacher was dating my freshman religion teacher. Both wonderful people and two of the only young teachers in the school. So of course everyone in my class speculated on it. But they both denied it up and down, and nobody had any real proof. But it was definitely a rumor all of our freshman year. They had the same break period my sophomore year, and the class I had during that time was in between their two classrooms. So my history teacher would usually walk by in the direction of my religion teacher's classroom. My history teacher was also a coach of mine and was a really great guy. So when he walked by the room I was in, he would often look in that room and give me a funny look to try to get me to laugh while in class, or say my name while walking by just to say hi to try and annoy me, I guess. Then by my senior year, they were married and couldn't really deny it after that, and she changed her last name to his. And by now, they have a really cute family when I ran into him a little bit ago. Story number 52. We had this thick goth girl in the class next to ours who was visiting the room which was in the lowest basement of our high school. It was really just a small closet-like room where the old janitor used to put his tools and stuff in there and locking the door. Rumors said that she had a spare key somehow and she was going in, but no one actually ever saw her doing that. Yet, she was always disappearing under everyone's eyes in the break time. Some cleaning personnel claimed they heard weird noises and muffled screams from the basements during the break time, but nobody could confirm, and we all took it as a joke, like they were trying to mess with us because we were talking about this thick goth girl disappearing and all that, so we believed it was just lies. 3 years later, and we all graduated from the high school, with that girl too. That surprisingly, she had no one to be there with her that day. And even more weird, she didn't have friends with her either. She was just sitting all alone in one of the balconies at the top of the building. I felt bad, you know, and I also liked her, so I just walked up to her. She had her back on me. Yet, she made a small, sudden, quick movement, like it felt like a serpent, and without looking at me, she said, "What?" I thought I probably scared her because I bumped a bit on the entrance door and coughed to signal that I was approaching. Didn't want to make her feel threatened or surprised like someone is sneaking up on her. It felt weird, so I tried to make my presence known. Anyway, I closed the gap between us a bit and remained about 2 meters away or so from her so she won't feel pressured or victimized. And I asked her, "Hey, what's up with you? Why did nobody come for you?" I meant her family or friends, if she had any. And she didn't look at me and looked up in the sky and she said, "They are already here, waiting for me." And I started to get a bit worried. Then I noticed she waved at a car with a couple waiting for her down the road, so I ignored that too. Then she said, "Anything else you would like to ask me?" And I thought about it. At this point, I was feeling she wasn't into me. So I tried saving face by asking her straight out saying, "Hey, so there were silly rumors about you going to the room in the break times. Is that true?" And she stood still, literally still, frozen still, like a statue for a good 5 seconds. But I kid you not, these 5 seconds felt like an hour. Everything felt so slow for some reason. Then she took a turn and looked at me, and I will never forget her gaze. She walked up to me, closed the gap between us even more, and she whispered in my ear, "I was self-pleasuring in there." And then she left. The end. Okay, so this woman steals a pair of keys, sneaks into the closet, rubs one out, nobody figures out, tells OP, doesn't elaborate, leaves. What a goth Chad. God bless this woman for, actually, let me stop. I can't promote that behavior. That's on school grounds. What am I doing? Anyway, next story. Story number 53. Everyone said our band director was married to a former student. We started hearing this in 7th grade. He was in his late 40s, early 50s, and used to be the head high school band director, so his position did seem to be a bit of a demotion, but we were young and didn't think that way. He was also bland and unattractive, though very gifted, and we couldn't see how any younger student would be into him, ignorant perspective, and we never saw his wife at any functions. That was a bit odd as it is a tight-knit community, and the other section leaders' wives, coaches' wives, and husbands, etc. would usually be around. Fast forward to my junior year, and my mom taught in the elementary school. Same district and all buildings are on the same road, and her new teaching partner had the same last name as my still band director. It was an unusual last name, and I assumed it was his daughter or niece or something. He had been promoted back up to high school my freshman year. Mind you, he was promoted right back to head band director of the high school, almost like he had been serving a punishment or suspension, as there are about 5 or 6 other band leaders under him for the other sections and bands. Anyway, I went to give her some candy from my mom for a holiday party. Their classrooms were in pods and connected, so I walked through her room every day, and she wasn't in, so I had to leave it for her, and on her desk was a photo of her, a very young new teacher, and my band director on their wedding day. I guess when she graduated college, they felt fine about giving him his old job back, and I later found out from my mom that they married 3 days after she graduated, and he had been her band director all 4 years of high school. Yikes. When I was young, I kept thinking about how gorgeous she was and why she would want to be with him when she could probably have anyone. When I grew up, I realized he was just a predator and she was groomed. This was 20 years ago, and they are still married and have 3 children. Story number 54. Pretty innocent compared to all the sex stuff around here, but in my school, me and my friends kept workshopping ways to skip class. But whenever school found out the current way we used to escape, they would find a way to shut it down a couple of months later. So we had to get increasingly more creative as the years went on. But one thing we always theorized about since 6th grade was that the electronic door in the principal's office that led outside the school had its switch placed near the office's entrance. So we could, in theory, sneak into the principal's office and open the door silently and sneak out through there. We kept this as just an idea until one day in the 2nd year of high school, me and my friend really wanted to leave to watch a show we were hyped about, and we decided, F it, it's worth a shot. So we basically made this impromptu prison break where one was the one who unlocked the door while the other gave info from a vantage point. And we managed to sneak out underneath the principal's nose as she was inside the office at the time. After realizing how easy it turned out to be, we started sneaking out through there whenever we needed until we graduated. Story number 55. I had this really weird teacher when I was in middle school. Let's call him Mr. P. My school went from kindergarten to high school, so almost all the students knew each other, and we were also familiarized with the teachers of different grades. Mr. P was new. He came when I was entering my 2nd year of middle school, and soon the rumor was that he was a creep and it started going around. They said that he used to sit on the benches under the cafeteria so he could look up the skirts of the girls walking by. It was like a balcony, and that he checked out the girls when they walked to the front of class. One girl one time tried to get a reaction out of him by slowly pushing a pencil up her skirt while looking at him directly in the eye. He did nothing, just watched, in the middle of the classroom. All of this was around the time where Facebook was becoming a big hit, and everyone else was befriending everyone they slightly knew. Mr. P started adding us too, all of the students in his classes, and he would comment on our pictures. Eventually, I moved out of town, but my friend was in the same high school all through high school, and once she contacted me very scared that she was using Mr. P's laptop for a presentation and accidentally opened a folder that contained pictures of several girls from that middle school, including me and my friend. They were clearly taken out of Facebook, and I told my friend to report it to the principal, but she was too scared. In the end, we just blocked the teacher from all social media. He created another account later and tried to add me, but I blocked him there too. And I didn't hear from him until a couple of years later, where another friend, a male, showed me that he posted he was retiring and that he was so happy to have taught in our school. He hadn't even worked a decade there, and he definitely wasn't that old. Story number 57. At my school, we had a really weird Balinese teacher. She was always very erratic and wouldn't make sense with the things she said, but we assumed it was just that she was old. A year before I left, there was a pretty nasty rumor spreading around that she is a kid toucher and likes experimenting weird things on kids. I don't know what to think of it, but it wasn't a worry for me anymore as I left the class. A few years later, I left the school and I found out the truth. She got fired and in fact was a kid toucher. Of sorts. She used different mixes of drugs and put them in kids' shoes to make them more suggestive and aroused. And how did I know the truth? Well, a friend sent me a video the teacher made confirming the drug side of things and the suggestive and aroused side of things. I am so glad I am not at that school anymore. Story number 58. In junior high, we had a last-minute shop teacher. He was very odd and mildly racist. We were an indigenous community, and he would say how our people were uneducated and didn't take their opportunities. He didn't have lessons planned, but he did manage to order us around, and we all joked that he wasn't a real teacher. He would say some strange things to us, and a lot of us would say to him, "I'm going to tell the principal." He had a repeated and urgent reply of, "Go ahead." And I found out a few years later that a couple of days before school started, the real teacher quit. In the haste to find a new teacher, the principal took and interviewed with him, where my old teacher said he went to college and he had a teaching degree. He had forgotten to bring proof or whatever teachers are supposed to supply, and he said he would later. The principal had no other option and hired him. He avoided that area with the principal, and it was over a year before they found out he never went to any college or university. So, we were right. He wasn't a teacher. He was just an a-hole. Story number 60. Not high school, but middle school. At my middle school, there was a tradition where all of the 8th graders would go to a week-long overnight wilderness camp at the beginning of the year. The main purpose of this was for the kids to bond and get to know each other. About a month after the trip happened, one of the 8th grade teachers randomly disappeared. I was in 6th grade, so I have no idea what happened, and there were people saying he got fired or quit or something along those lines. And then a rumor popped up that he was fired because during the wilderness camp, he hosted a secret fight club for the boys after dark. Obviously, none of us believed this and thought the older kids were just messing with us. After a couple of months of the school suspiciously not saying why he was gone, and so many other kids corroborating the story, it seemed to be true. Some nights he'd get the boys from the cabin he was in charge of and let/make them fight each other. And sometimes him and the other boys would bet on who would win the fight. Super effed up and surprised it happened, especially since I went to a small private school with around 50 people in each grade. Story number 61. Mr. Duckers wasn't drinking coffee out of that mug. It was booze. The year after I graduated high school, a friend and I rented a little house together while we went to school and worked. One night, shortly after I came home from work around 11 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. I looked out the window, and it was Mr. Duckers. So I opened it. He was always a cool guy, and he was wasted. Like, couldn't form words. Just walked into my house and hit the bong sitting on my coffee table like we were old buddies. I hadn't seen him since senior year literature class or whatever, and had no idea we had moved a few houses down from him. Anyway, I could not get him out of my house, and that was the start of a 2-year stalking endeavor that ended with a restraining order. He lost his job, and probably, hopefully, his wife. So yeah, Mr. Duckers was drinking booze in his mug, and I hope he sees this and remembers what an absolute piece of crap he is for terrorizing 2 teenage girls who used to look up to him. If I could time travel, I would open the door that night, punch him in his little face, lock the door, and resume my bong in peace. Story number 62, that the football coach was sleeping with students. The rumors died down during my junior year when the band teacher had a baby with a student 2 years older than me, was of age but had been in a relationship with the teacher since she was a junior, and a current student lost her mind because he was also sleeping with him and she didn't know about the other girl. After college, I moved back to my hometown and I ran into one of the more popular girls from my high school at a bar. I was not one of the popular girls, and we were talking about high school and how silly it was, and I mentioned the rumor that the football coach sleeping with students and how ridiculous it was. The girl looked at me and then straight up told me it wasn't a rumor. She had a 3-year relationship with him until she was a sophomore in college when he met and married another teacher at our high school. I didn't know how much I believed her until she showed me some photos. She seemed okay with it all, but I told her that what he did wasn't okay. He took advantage of her, and that it was okay to not be okay. She said she appreciated it, but she was long over it. We used to text every once in a while, but I haven't spoken to her in years. I hope she's okay. Story number 63. We had a baseball coach that was married, with children, taught a business leadership class, and was the head honcho of the Christian Athlete Club. Just before Christmas break during my junior year, a rumor was going around that he was getting real flirty and handsy with one of the younger math teachers. No one that I know really cared about it. He was a bit too friendly around her in my eyes, but whatever. Fast forward to May 2015, last few weeks of school, exams done, classes are just chilling at this point, not doing much. A video somehow gets in the hands of students of this coach and math teacher, butt-ass naked, going at it hardcore in the pitcher's mound of the baseball field. The video got wiped pretty quickly, but the damage was done. Both teachers were fired. From what I understood, he's still married to the same woman he was before. before. Never heard what happened to the math teacher, though. Then, the woodworking teacher was allegedly drinking alcohol in his coffee, and no one believed him until he stepped out of the classroom one day for a phone call, and another student in my class opened his desk drawer and found it stuffed full of the single-shot bottles of vodka. Alright guys, I gotta be honest with you, that is awful, terrible to hear, and it's just so nosy. Why is that little brat looking through the teacher's desk? It's just a little bit of vodka during work hours, so what? If you're passing the class, whatever. If you're failing, you're probably gonna fail anyway, let's be honest, you suck. Anyway, next story. Story number 64. A middle school English teacher got fired for having adult content on his computer, but reinstated because they couldn't fill the position. I believe it was true because I didn't have him as a teacher, but he knew me by first and last name, always sought me out, and even bought some of my crappy artwork that we had displayed. Then in high school, not a rumor but the truth, had a chemistry professor, who I also never had as a teacher, know me by name and invite me to come deep sea fishing with him and camp out on the beach and eat our catch of the day for dinner. He wanted me to come with him because he said his kids thought it was lame. I'm upset I never reported him. And then another truth is a married young history teacher effed one of my friends. She had a new super cool cell phone that I was curious about, and she told me, just don't go through my messages. And when I asked to play with it, well, of course I went through her messages. Text messages from the history teacher after she chopped her hair off, like, oh, you look so top model, and then a litany of racy things. She was his student helper on his off period. Story number 65. A girl from my older brother's graduating class fell in love with their literature teacher. They kept their relationship a secret for 3 to 4 years. I'm unsure as to the duration, as this was a few years before I went to high school there, and they tried to keep it a secret, but rumors start even though nothing concrete could ever be found. They eloped the day after graduation. Last I heard, they're still happily married with, I think, 3 kids, and those kids would be junior or senior high school age now. Then one of my brother's classmates literally effed a sheep. Someone was throwing a my parents aren't home for the weekend party, and everyone was drinking, and someone effed a sheep. At one point, there was a crappy flip phone video of the incident, but this was 2 to 3 years before the creation of YouTube, and I'm sure someone posted it to their MySpace at some point, but after 20 years, the video is long gone. However, he is still known as the sheep effer to this day. And then 2 of my classmates were caught effing in a classroom. I heard the rumor of this happening when I was in 6th grade. Where I grew up, it was part of the elementary school, and it was 2 older kids in junior high according to the rumor. Well, the rumor was not wrong. I had almost every single class with the pair. I became good friends with the girl, who was a 14-year-old 7th grader, and I tutored the guy, who was a 16-year-old 7th grader. I'm the reason he moved on to 8th grade. Our English lit teacher sat us together specifically so I could help him, without asking me, by the way, or so he could copy off me if I wasn't willing to help. She didn't care if we talked about the lesson while she was talking, so long as we whispered. She just wanted him out of her class after 3 years of him loudly disrupting the class, being rude, and just not getting through to him. Then we were eventually paired up for one group assignment, and I got him to do the work, put in the effort, and actually pass, and suddenly she made me his tutor. I didn't mind, it just would have been nice if she had asked me, especially since she and I were friends. I was friends with her niece and one of her nephews, and babysat her great-nephews. Okay, so real quick, did anybody else notice how OP did not elaborate on the last story? They were caught effing in the classroom. Anyway, I'm gonna vent about becoming this person's tutor. I'm like, okay, cool, but where's the juicy bits? And also, I'm realizing a lot of these teachers who groom their students and then get married with them, they have 3 kids. Like, I feel multiple times throughout this video, I swear, I've seen the grooming teacher with the student and they have 3 kids. I don't know why that is. 3's the lucky number, I guess. Anyway, next story. Story number 66. So, long story, my acquaintance/classmate, his mother, a married woman, was a teacher at my school. And the rumor was that her and my own science teacher, awesome bachelor guy and a great teacher, were having an affair. And well, it's pretty common for such rumors to fly around, but crap got extremely serious when that teacher got pregnant and had a baby while still married to my friend's father, not anyone in our school. Turns out my friend's father had his suspicions and he got a paternity test. The child was not his. So naturally, they got divorced, and by that time, my science teacher got a promotion and became the vice principal. So it would have looked wrong on his part if he left my friend's mom alone and didn't take the responsibility for the baby. So he didn't claim paternity, but I think he supported my friend's mom with his own personal money and stuff. So he now wanted to marry her, and they even got engaged, but the baby didn't resemble him either. Something about earlobes being different. So he also got a paternity test, and it wasn't his child either. Then my friend and that teacher left the school and shifted to a different city, and my awesome teacher was really bummed out. Not a lot of people know this entire story, even in my school. I got to know this because my aunt is the principal's friend. Story number 67. Our school's priest was the cool priest because he was young and played video games and basketball and openly talked about this in his homilies. I always thought he was trying too hard to relate to the students, but some boys in middle school would go to his house to play video games. 12 plus years later, I'm talking to my sister who has friends that work at our old high school, where he is a priest. Apparently, he's been moved to a new diocese because he's been accused of SAing a few of the boys from my school. Yet again, this man is still a priest after abusing children. But the Catholic Church has their ways of moving priests about to make sure their disgusting ways don't get out. Also, my sister wasn't supposed to tell anyone because her friends who work at the school were very adamant to say that nothing was proven. But what the hell? If a child has the courage to come forward, I think there's a strong possibility of it being true. The lawsuit is still underway, but it makes me so sad to think about the boys in my class that went to his house to play video games. Story number 68. One of the teachers at my school just kind of disappeared partway through the semester. I was in his class at the time, and our class was told there'd be a sub for a few days, and she just kind of never left. About a month or something later, maybe more, I don't know, kind of a long time, she announced that she would be there until the end of the exams. So everybody started with the rumors, like he's an alcoholic and went to rehab, his wife left him and he had a mental breakdown, he died horribly under mysterious circumstances, he ran off to some foreign country with his mistress, his wife died of brain cancer, and he took her on a trip to die happily and never came back from abroad. Anything and everything you could think of. Kids were naming it as the reason for his sudden disappearance. So time goes on, and eventually the rumors die down. Second semester passes, and a new year starts, and almost the full first semester goes by. But once everyone's accepted he's gone and not really thinking about it anymore, mere days before we're to switch classes for the next semester, his name shows up in the obituary, and he actually died. So he must have been really sick while teaching us, and none of us knew, and the time away was spent battling whatever illness he had. He was a little wonky sometimes, but everybody just kind of thought he was a silly dude. One of my favorite teachers to this day. The second day of new classes, there was a memorial held at the school. The teacher I had for the same subject was actually his brother-in-law and had a little memorial altar set up in his classroom to honor him. It was really hard sitting in the gym and seeing this new teacher, also a phenomenal dude, with tears just streaming down his face. It was really hard to keep it together myself too because, as I said, he was one of my favorites. But it got inappropriate for me to cry, so I waited until I got home. Teachers were crying too, and they did a song for him that a group of teachers sang, and there were a lot of prayers. I had to keep looking away and squeeze my girlfriend's hand real tight to keep the tears back until the memorial was over. It was really awful. I hope he's resting peacefully, and I hope that those rumors weren't like ill feelings on his soul or something. Like, if he's out there somewhere and knew what everyone was saying, I hope he thought it was just kids being kids, or us coping in our own way with him leaving out of the blue. I just hope he's okay wherever he is. And I still don't know how he died. The obituary didn't say, and no one ever told us. Story number 69. The art teacher, a large 7-foot-tall man in his late 60s, was rumored to be a predator, accidentally dropping things for girls to pick up and then eyeing them when they bent over. Many of us denied it though, as he was very nice to everyone in his class and seemed to be kind-hearted with a good sense of humor, sort of like if your grandpa was your teacher. In senior year, he suddenly just disappeared one day and never came back. It turned out that he had been caught hiding in the schoolyard one evening taking pictures of some of the girls in my class who were just hanging out around there minding their own business. Our school refused to comment on his disappearance, with the teachers telling us they were not allowed to discuss it. Something shady was going on with the school too, because they had somehow worked something out to allow him a forced retirement and to just pretty much avoid any further questioning. No one will ever know what he intended to do with those pictures or those girls, and I'm quite certain that the school never brought the situation to any higher authority, keeping it amongst themselves. And the worst part, I saw him in a Walmart about a year ago just getting groceries as if nothing had happened. Absolutely terrifying. Story number 71. When I was in elementary school, a couple of us got bored and made up this story about our science teacher and math teacher. We told each other that they were cheating on their spouses and hooking up after school. We had absolutely no evidence, and we didn't think it was an actual thing. We were just bored children. Some months later, our science teacher tells us that she recently got a divorce and that her last name was changing, and that she wanted to be called by that. So instead of Mrs. M, she was Miss C. Most of us didn't think about it. A couple of weeks later, our math teacher stopped wearing his wedding ring, and that was very noticeable noticeable because he always took it off when he started writing on the chalkboard. He claimed he didn't like the chalk getting underneath the ring. Well, one day he starts writing on the chalkboard and he never took his ring off. Come to notice, he wasn't even wearing it in the first place. Okay, weird. Then we started connecting the dots. Suddenly, they were always in the same places together. Recess duty, they both had it. Lunch duty in the cafeteria, then they were both there. He coached soccer, and suddenly she was the assistant coach. My friends and I started getting super skeptical. Still though, no evidence. Until one day, classes were over. The bell had rung. Most of the buses had already taken the kids home. My mom was coming to pick me up and my best friend after an art club that we were in. The art club was happening in the cafeteria because we were using paints and it was easier to clean up. I said to the teacher on duty that I had to go back to my homeroom to get my winter boots as I had forgotten them. My best friend tagged along with me as we headed to the classroom. The door was shut, but not locked. I swung it open and wham bam, there was our science teacher on her desk with her legs spread open and our math teacher in between them. My friend shrieked and I was a fish out of water. Our teacher screamed and I fainted. I was woken to my best friend screaming, "We gotta get out of here!" and our teacher screaming, "Get back in here!" And what was their plan? I don't know, maybe bribe us or something to not tell? Well, we sprinted to the principal's office and started rambling and screaming. Long story short, one of them was fired and the other quit. Pretty sure they got married a couple of weeks later. The last time I saw either one of them was just a couple of years ago. I'm now 26 years old, and they had a kid and looked happy. So good for them, but damn, am I scared. Story number 72. Okay, supposedly nice high school in Budapest, good neighborhood. All of these are confirmed by either former teachers or having been proven. First, principal, 50 to 60-ish woman, wears a wig. Then my principal used to sleep with the cafeteria guy, was once caught making out with him after a ball. Then one of my teachers used to take week-long leaves, was late and absent a lot, needed substitution. She claimed it was because of her ill husband who she needed to take care of. She was just a chronic alcoholic. Then one of the gym teachers, 45-ish male, slept with the 25 to 30-ish school secretary assistant after the gym teacher got a divorce. They were even together publicly. Then my history teacher actually lived in the history accessory room, which is not accessible to students, and was there for a while. Many funny stuff regarding that. He was seen very early around 7 a.m. brushing his teeth in the handicapped toilet many times. But the damning evidence was when the school was closed due to COVID. One of the current students spotted from the background items that he was in fact live teaching online from the history accessory room. Not a single other teacher did that. Then a girl my age, 18 to 19 at the time, was in a relationship with a 65-year-old man inventor who sells and advertises fake electrical resonant chakra crystal healing stuff that rips off elderly people. Now she is his assistant, and they sell totally worthless fake devices for $1,000. Even a healing CD audio that costs $200. The girl actually worships the guy and believes in this stuff. Then one of the literature teachers was an alcoholic. He was seen drunk with a redhead many times outside after school days in the area. And finally, one of the students slept with a dance instructor who was working with the school. Story number 73. We had a wonderful couple working at our school. She was the thespian teacher, and he was the drama, musical, theater production director. And I cannot play up enough how much these people were loved and revered by students, staff, and parents alike. They often brought their 2 young kids, both under 8, when we held weekend rehearsals or during performances. We all felt like a big family. There were never any rumors that I heard about, but it turns out the husband was sleeping with multiple young students. We were all shocked, but our hearts broke for his wife and kids, and they were never the same. She ended up quitting sometime later, and he is in jail now. Then there was another scandal that happened when the computer/technology teacher found out her husband had been SAing their 8th grade daughter for years. I was working at the school at the time, along with my mother, who was a teacher for almost 30 years at the school. Aside from immediate teaching staff, I was the only other non-essential personnel that knew, and it broke my heart because it ended up explaining a lot of her personality and attitude issues. Story number 74. This is way less serious or hard-hitting than the other responses I'm seeing here, but I'm dying to share. Junior year advanced English teacher was an attractive, super cool, well-spoken, reserved, funny man in his early 30s. We were all good students, but that didn't mean we liked to stay on topic, and at any chance we got, we would try to turn the conversation to his personal life. Over the course of the year, we got a lot out of him, and he definitely warmed up to us. He was 32, married, and had a 2-year-old daughter. And now this is where it gets juicy, folks. 2 doors down the hall was another very well-liked advanced English teacher in her early 30s who also happened to be conventionally attractive. Early on in the year, we noticed that the two of them spent a lot of time together, both with a small group of English teachers and on their own. It started out as a dumb joke that they were having an affair, but by winter break, 2 different students had walked into his classroom during lunch to ask him a question and found them alone very much in each other's personal space. Still, nothing confirmed though. We were a bunch of gossipy rascals, so we ran with it for the rest of the year, but nothing new ever came of it. Just more sightings of one-on-one walks around the school and time spent together between classes. We all kinda moved on after the class ended, but the suspicion still lingered. Fast forward to graduation, and we're all talking to him after the ceremony and somehow drag out of him that he's getting a divorce. Crazy. Fast forward another year, and I hear from my little sister that her English teacher is also getting divorced. Bet you can guess who her teacher was. Then fast forward to last year. I find him on Facebook and go to friend him. I notice his profile pic is him and the other English teacher together. And that is when I realized the true power of a-hole-ish kid detectives. Story number 75. There were rumors that some of the security guards were racist and seized more of the white student stuff than black student stuff, when more of the white students didn't do anything alarming enough to promote such action. Most of the security guards were dark-skinned in general, which made it more of an iffy subject to talk about at all. And well, it turned out it was right. Some time ago, me and my friends played some games in a corner of the lunchroom, where we were away from all of the super loud conversations, which were more often the same old nonsense. We don't do a whole lot of cussing or swearing, but sometimes a few slip out here and there, not offensive in any means, they're just needed in the moment. Then, the security guard overhears one of our swears and threatens to take our console if we don't quiet down, and I gestured to the kids behind us who go ham with swearing. And something about someone having sex or something, I don't know, but the group were mostly consisting of black students. Then he saw my gesture and said something along the lines of, "Oh, they just messing around, and that's nothing compared to you," etc., etc. And I just remembered thinking, wow, either that's stereotyping at its finest or racism at its worst. Well, a week later, he was fired for something about C's without cause and being racist. I hear some students miss him, and I personally don't have much care about it anymore. It's not I didn't like him, it's that I only had one real encounter with him. And well, you just read how that went. I shall give no specific names or places here to prevent drama in general because, oh boy, I think we know what this has potential for. Story number 76. It was rumored that the previous principal of my school hated my dad. My dad is the high school basketball coach of my old school, and has been so for about 25 years now. This was about 10 years ago, but I remember a few nights where Dad would be pretty angry about something. Never knew what it was until later. Things I learned happening behind the scenes were interesting. He blocked basically every attempt for my dad to get some funding for the team. They needed new uniforms. The principal convinced them to out the money into choir uniforms and new instruments. Uniforms for a program that students rarely joined willingly. Apparently, he never actually went to a basketball game because my dad was the coach. He tried to get my dad fired a few times. That never worked because my dad is a pretty well-known man in our community and has impeccable character. Anyway, there's more things that happened behind the scenes that I don't remember. We learned about it after the fact. And the only reason any of this came out was because some members of the school board actually apologized to my dad for hiring the principal. On top of that, our music program was decommissioned, the instruments and choir uniforms were sold, and the basketball team got new jerseys. Story number 77. This happened not where I was a student, but where I subbed, about 15 years ago. The school was really proud of its football coach, who took them to the state championship game. A game where they got creamed, but whatever, and he took them for the first time ever. But in the spring, there were rumors he wouldn't be coming back for another run. Word was that he had been down in the Bahamas or something on spring break, staying at a hotel where, as luck would have it, a student and their family were also staying. No, it doesn't go quite where you think from here. One night at the bar, the parents saw him, youngish guy, not married, chat up some girl who looked to be about 18 or so, then leave with her and go back to his room. Then they told the district when they got back, and I guess in today's climate, they decided that they couldn't take the risk if he did wind up having an inappropriate relationship with the student at some later time, and it could be proved they knew of this. They decided to let him finish out the year and then let him go. And indeed, at the very end of the school year, I saw that they had posted his job as open. He went on to coach at a smaller school somewhere not too far away, and I don't know what, if anything, anything might have happened there, but I don't recall another state championship run. Story number 79. We had a few teachers who were really close, went on holiday together and everything. We'll call them Mr. A, Mr. B, and Miss C. There were rumors going around that Mr. A and Miss C were doing some extracurriculum activities, if you get my gist, and there were also rumors that Mr. B and Miss C were also a little bit too close. A year down the line, Mr. A and Miss C are married, but the rumors of Miss C and Mr. B were still going strong. They worked the same department and sometimes shared classes. There was a clear tension between Mr. A and B, and students began to talk about the awkwardness of the lessons. Soon after these events, Mr. A and B stopped even acknowledging each other. Turns out by the end of the year that Miss C had been seeing both and married Mr. A while still seeing Mr. B. It obviously ended with a divorce, and the teachers had a fight outside of school property and hours, and Mr. A was arrested and fired. The few students who had started the rumor found out when they had hidden in a classroom storage closet. I don't know why they did it, but they weren't the best behaved students, and the students were excluded from the school, and not long after, Miss C announced she was pregnant and that it was Mr. A's child. Then 2 years later, in my final year of school, Miss C and Mr. B got married. Not the most interesting story, but there were many rumors and theories going around for a few years before the situation finally settled, and I thought it was a wacky story to share. Story number 80. My ex-robotics teacher was a predator. My teacher, let's call him Robert, was the main robotics coordinator in high school. He gave a very chill vibe, he was young, so he was really well liked by the students. As a coach of the robotics team, that meant he was the main chaperone on out-of-town trips, meaning he was in charge of 15 to 20 students, all from age ranges 14 to 18. During those trips, he enjoyed going to the pool with us, and would often bring up the idea of having video game nights inside students' hotel rooms. Also, Mr. Robert would offer rides to students to their homes, and this would later get him fired from our school district because he didn't have the appropriate defensive driving certifications that our school district required to have teachers drive students around if needed. He would later work for another school, and it wasn't until I saw on the news that he was arrested because he was caught during an operation by the FBI that was designed to catch predators by setting up fake underage boys' profiles on Grindr. The full report says that he was in contact with a 13-year-old boy who in reality was an undercover FBI agent, and Mr. Robert agreed to meet this boy while he was home alone. Once outside his house, he rang the doorbell, but was instead met with 5 FBI agents and local PD while searching in his car, and they found lube, dildos, ropes, handcuffs, ankle cuffs, whips, vibrators, ball gags, and toe cuffs. Needless to say, I was shocked that we would sometimes spend 4 hours after school with him to help prep for competitions, and that he was the main chaperone in various school trips. I guess you really don't know a person's true motives. Story number 81. I have 2. First came from Summit Elementary 4th grade. Ever since my 4th grade class had started up, there were a few rumors spreading around pretty fast. One of the fastest to spread around is that where the attic was to replace wires and fix lights and ducts had a whole secret room where multiple teachers and students performed demonic rituals. I never really believed it, but one of my friends did. Let's call her Kay. She said at our recess that we should skip lunch and look around to find it. Thinking we wouldn't find anything, I said yes. So we figured out a way to skip, we wound up hiding behind a huge pillar and they never saw us, and we walked our way around the school to find a way to get up. The janitor, I assume, had left a ladder near the 1st grade classes up to the attic. I did find that suspicious, but didn't pay mind to it. Kay and I climbed up into the attic and looked around for a couple of minutes, and we found nothing. I started to suggest that we leave because I was getting bored and lunch was ending soon, but Kay insisted that we kept on. So we kept going. We wound up finding a room over what sounded to be the front office, based on what I heard from below the attic, but all of it was cut when I heard odd, raspy chanting coming from the room that we had found. There was a tiny cutout in the drywall with glass tinted to level 4 through 5. Kay looked inside and saw something, and she motioned over for me to look, and when I did, I was horrified at what I saw. There was a bright red pentagram with what seemed to have words around it that looked like they said, "The return of Lucifer shall dispose of the non-believers, and the earth will be of his rule." Soon 6 people stepped in from the shadows of the room, 5 holding candles, 1 not, and 5 were tall, 1 short like a 3rd grade kid, and they all had red and black robes with hoods over their heads, like all cults do for some reason. Then they all gathered around the circle, and I heard them speaking but could only make out to things like, "Let the rituals commence," and "Vessel stand in the middle of the circle." The rest of it was unintelligible, and the vessel went to the middle of the pentagram and stayed put. The candles were placed on each point of the star and suddenly burst aflame. The people around the pentagram raised their arms and started chanting again. Soon, the vessel's body was lifted into the air very slowly. The body started to shake, and the pentagram had started to brightly glow. The vessel's face lit up from the eyes, and I knew exactly who almost everyone was. One was our janitor, a vice principal from a previous year, and a music, art, and gym teacher from previous years were the ones around it. But the one in the middle broke my heart the most. It was my best friend. It all went dark, and the candles had relit themselves, and the body of my friend was on the ground. I started to tear, but Kay pulled my arm and quietly said to me, "We need to leave," and we quickly left the attic and took the ladder down. We somehow got out before lunch ended, which had ended up being longer than I thought, and we were able to make it back to our class before they noticed we were gone. It turned out that the cults were true, with my best friend coming as the cost. Kay and I never told anybody this but a couple of friends, and ever since that incident, I have become very familiar and experienced in paranormal activity. I still have experiences constantly with the paranormal. And then my second story, Columbia Middle School, 7th grade. This is far shorter than the first. There were rumors spreading like wildfire that our superintendent was a pervert and even slept with some 7th grade girls in our classes. This one I felt was true because I sensed something wrong whenever I was near him. In my final period with a few of my friends, my teacher had to leave early and our superintendent took over for the remaining time. Me and my friend, I will call A, were doing the work we were assigned, where from the corner of my eye, I saw the superintendent checking out a female student. The superintendent was 20 years and the student was 12 years old, and he started to talk to her and he grabbed her arm and he let her out of the room. I have insanely good and sensitive hearing that developed more and more after the first story, by the way, and I heard him say, "I'm going to show you something fun you can do," with a huge smirk on his face, and I saw him leave his smile and we both suspected something was wrong. We started slowly following him. He led her to a secret room in the back of the room for special education kids. We instantly ran in, grabbed the girl, and ran back to the class. The superintendent was not far behind. We got back to the class and we got the girl to sit back down, and we had the superintendent on our backs. We threatened to tell all the staff, including all of the office people, to get him fired, and he tried to convince us that he was going to show her something to help her. I caught him when I said to him, "And what would that be?" He hesitated but wound up giving in. He led us to the room that we saw him in. We were cautious when doing this, and when we were there were handcuffs on the walls, and that was all I needed to see. A and myself ran to the office faster than I had ran in a very long time. We got to the office and told them everything, and the superintendent was frantically trying to tell them that we were mistaken, which he succeeded in. My school is full of stupid people who, of course, believe the adults when the kids obviously know what they're saying, and he is still in the school, but I worry every time I see him. I found both of these to be true, but in very traumatic ways. So, OP told two very different stories, one of which involved a guy levitating. I don't know if I personally believe that kind of stuff. I don't know if that happened. You know, sometimes kids see something, and also sometimes people just lie. If you know anything about Redditors, they sure do love their orange arrows. It is like currency and air at the same time for them. But I don't know if I believe that first one, and that also leads me not to believe OP's second one, but I mean, hey, it's up to you guys. Maybe you guys believe something. I think there's aliens out there. Are they, like your neighbors or anything? I don't know about that, but I don't think we're the only life in the galaxy. But anyway, guys, we are at the end of the video. I have been losing my voice for the last third of this video. I was doing some yelling for other voice acting endeavors, and it has caught up to me. But we are done. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a really good day, and